If something happens to the parents, the grandparents would take care of the baby or a cousin or a sibling or the community. Everything worked the way it was supposed to. Neighbors and family taking care of each other. Everyone knew where life actually began and where it ended. A baby was no less a clump of cells than an elderly person was. Everyone was equal. For the first time in over 100 years, the area was at peace. The city-states stubbornly stayed put, and we left them alone. One would trickle out here or there, and we would find a place where they could be productive and happy. The rest stayed too stubborn to admit that they were wrong and that their chosen paths were unsustainable. Nobody knows what happened to them. They just stopped coming out and life went on. The I-5 belt ended up becoming a new state, but stopped directly after the Redwoods in California Free State. The last I'd heard, middle of California had been Russian territory for a while, but also stayed in positive relations to NATO and the United Nations. Sort of turned into a new Eastern Orthodox sanctuary, more or less. I heard they were trying to get the internet running again somehow. The southern third of California returned to Mexican occupation. It was rife with cartels, gangs, and mafia. Nobody went down there for any reason if they weren't part of the culture and survived. Nevada and Arizona shut their water supplies off to California entirely since they weren't paying with real money or trading anymore. Arizona ended up extending its wall past its southern border to its western border, where it stopped at the Nevada border. Basically, two-thirds of California returned to being a desert like it used to. Wildfires saw that anything without immediate water source got returned back to the planet. Without government bailouts, despite rejecting federal law, the dams all failed and the rivers returned back to normal. To the right of the Cascades through Utah became Freedom Country. There were a lot of American flags and new radio stations, and everyone lived in harmony there. You could have as many guns as you wanted, and whatever kind you wanted. All of the U.S. government parkland got reabsorbed and managed by the state. Historic landmarks were spared, but the rest got cycled back into normal usage as was originally intended. No farmers ever got bothered again, and the tribes and their infrastructure were well supported. Silicon Valley ended up being like one of our two unofficial West Coast capitals, basically. All the software came from there, and all the innovations came from there. People would work on a project or an idea for a little bit. It would spin up or wind down and then get transferred out for sustainability, and then new ones would start up. It became an idea hub, sort of like a gigantic college town. Also kind of like a big software creation think tank. People from all over the world came there to learn and create. They were independent from all the politics since they were so powerful in their own right and wanted nothing to do with anything but creating for the greater good. Most of the rest of this new Mexico ended up being appropriated as desert, just like how it used to be. Once the waterways settled back to the way they were pre-agriculture industry, new and sustainable crops emerged for the area. I heard it ended up being lots of agave, which produced a byproduct that all the vehicles in the area were modified to run off of. The Puyallup tribe ended up handling the refinery very well. It put a lot of people to work and gave them something very prideful to work towards. They ensured the environment was taken care of and that the land was taken care of ethically and sustainably. Soon, other portions of the Salish nation reached out and all started networking, trading, and shipping in to make sure they all had what they needed. Everyone in our local area was making greenhouses and huge food preservation stores so they would have a strong, sustainable crop for the next year. There were smokers going and canning and jarring. The trade market was going full speed, so everyone got what they wanted. All of the almanacs had predicted we were going to have a bitterly nasty winter. So many gentle summers and falls in a row wouldn't last forever. Epilogue. All of the thoughts swirled through my head as I walked back to my tiny home after teaching the kids for the day. They liked learning history, and we would have special guests if it was time to learn about music, gardening, or game preparation. They learned everything from gun cleaning and repair to foraging to medicinal herbs to communication, critical thinking, and conflict resolution. Telling them my stories was a good counterbalance to fill that story itch they always had. Tell us another story, tell us another story. I regretted telling the stories out of order, but with my headaches, nothing ever seemed to happen in order. They didn't seem to mind. My cat was making noises at me. I checked her food and water, and both were fine. I plugged in my electronics into the wall, and they started charging. I took my AR off, hung up my rig, and got ready for bed. I didn't dawdle around much. I was always too exhausted. I could only ever handle about 6 hours worth of work, and that was with breaks every 20 to 40 minutes. I had some trail mix that my friends made me to fill up my tummy a bit. There's lots of oats and grains in it, which I liked. I nibbled on some and slumped down on the bed. Within moments, I was out cold. I imagined snowy hills, tripwires, and gun battles all around a big lake. Trying not to step on the tripwires, I unconsciously pulled my covers around my neck as I let out a single shiver. My cat cuddled a little bit closer. Alright, here is an excerpt from book number 8 of the P&W Affliction series called Summer and Winter. Chapter 1, Classroom Storytime, 3 years after the collapse, late winter, early spring. I was teaching class again in our stronghold, which is my usual thing to do. I was really enjoying the teaching gig. We just got done doing some arts and crafts. Some of the kids wanted to nap, which I let them. It was snowing outside. The bitter winter we'd been guessing would come finally came. The passes were completely closed off at least a few months. We'd had some plows, but they'd stopped because it was too dangerous. The mountain range wasn't lava-y, which was good. The volcanoes all went back to being dormant and sort of just sat there pouting as snow gathered on them. More snow and more snow. We'd had greenhouses, though, and everything was canned and jarred up, so we were quite prepared for this. We couldn't splurge on food, but at least nobody had to go hungry. With the fuel from the coast's oil rig and refinery, we were able to get enough tractors running to get everyone fed. Then when the electricity kicked back on, we could go back to pumping the natural gas to heat our homes as well. We had to take all kinds of special precautions to make sure our pipes didn't freeze now that the water was running again. It was quite the exercise. We completely winterized the main house. I'd done that before when I lived in this busted-up duplex for a few years. It would literally get colder inside than outside until I figured it out. The windows all had clear plastic sheets covering them, and all the seals had been redone. All of the foam insulation had been redone, and stuffed wash rags and vents that didn't have coverings. Thankfully, we were able to find all the materials sitting in an abandoned home improvement center. Apparently nobody cared about those items. This made the foam insulation plentiful. We grabbed as much as we could carry, then sent the rest to the hub for trade so everyone could seal up as well. So the main building was nice and warm. The kids had some warm winter gear, but not a ton. They could only play out in the snow for a half an hour or so before they were ready to come in and thaw. There were 2 tremendous snow forts outside with accompanying trenches. The parents had all got in on it also, and there had been many epic snow battles. A lot of the snow clothes had been made or modified by hand. Where we couldn't get synthetic clothes for everyone, we insulated our winter wear with down from the birds. Some of it we got ourselves, some was scavenged from pillows, and the rest we traded around for. The second challenge was getting it all waterproofed. The third challenge was keeping the wind off. To avoid that, the guys that were going to be patrolling and holding defensive positions for hunting all got the best suits. The kids got the smaller stuff so they could play and get exercise and, most importantly, socialize. We kept the kids coming indoors often to make sure they would keep dried out and didn't get frostbite or burned from the snow. Unfortunately, the snow would burn every part of the little kids that weren't covered up, so we had to be careful. We also had sunglasses for them all that was quite fun and kept their eyes safe from the glare and projectiles. So here we were all sitting, their clothes drying out, a few of them passed out from play exhaustion, some light snacks getting handed out, looked like cups of cereal, and they wanted to hear a story, and they wanted a story about something that was both warm and cold. Kid logic made no sense whatsoever, but that's why it was always so much fun to talk to them. And with everyone relaxing, I started.